Welcome everyone to the June 17th presentation of the 1619 project discussion group. This morning we have a special guest, Pastor Lucius Smith from the Friendship Pasadena Church will be here to give us a presentation about the church and its history in the life of Pasadena community. So we look forward to hearing from Pastor Lucius Smith and hope everyone enjoys the session. All right, well, welcome everyone. Pastor Smith is here now and he's ready to go. And Pastor Smith is the senior pastor at Friendship Pasadena Church, and he's also a lifelong member. So he's well qualified and positioned to be able to tell us the whole story of the Pasadena Church and its place in the history of Pasadena. So with that, I won't take any more time. There are an introduction to Pastor Smith and his credentials and everything is available on the web. So I'll just let Pastor Smith take it from here. So it's all yours, Pastor Smith. Go ahead. And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Good morning to everyone. I decided again, rather than sit at home on my computer, that I was going to try to come down here to the church and do this off of my iPad, because that way I might be able even to walk around the church and give you a little, of the bird's eye view. I'm sitting in what's called Carter's Chapel. The windows behind me are the windows that face the Lacey side, and this tends to serve as an overflow room or a classroom. There are some bifold windows that close and can separate this area off. But as was said earlier, I was born and raised here, not literally born, but brought in as an infant on my parents' knees, born in 1959. And during that time, I think Friendship was in what many might consider its heyday. The civil rights movement was in full effect. And the pastor at that time, Reverend Marvin T. Robinson, was very, very active in the civil rights issues, not only here in Pasadena, but all across the country. Both he and my father were instrumental. My father's name was Fletcher Smith. He was a two-time president of the NAACP. He served as a trustee here, a business owner, well-respected in the community. And both he and Reverend Robinson were instrumental in bringing Martin Luther King Jr. here to preach. There's actually a picture, and hopefully, if time permits, in what I call our history hall, where Dr. King is standing over my shoulder and the former pastor's son shoulder, and that's kind of my claim to fame. I really had no clue at that time as to who I was standing with and who he was, but just to have been touched by and in some ways impacted by his presence, and also what he was doing in the world really is just a great memory that I have. I'm actually a stand-in for Deacon Marcus Williams. Actually, I was first approached, and I'd sought to delegate that to Deacon Williams because he is like the one of the non-official historians of the church, and also of things going on in Pasadena. There's some things that I know, but he literally can walk you through it. But my dear friend, I think he forgot that he was not as young as he may have thought he was, got up on a ladder, fell off, and the things that happen when people of our age fall off ladders hit him. And so he called me and said, "Could you stand in for me?" And I said, "All right, I'll do my best." He did write some handwritten notes, and I'd like to just basically in respect of what he did, kind of read this, and then I'll kind of tell you a little bit of my story and what I know. But he had some bulleted points, and again, bear with me as I try to read his handwriting. By 1893, there already was a substantial African-American presence in Pasadena. African-Americans were freely attending white churches, especially those run by Mennonites and every abolitionist sect. But as soon as Southern whites migrated to Pasadena, Blacks were soon viewed as possible competitors, and culture norms and mores demanded that Blacks be sequestered and separated in all aspects of life, including religious worship. I'll just inject this point here. When we renovated Friendship due to a lot of the earthquake damage, mainly the Northridge earthquake, and we renovated the building, one of the senior pastors at that time, Pastor Freeman Stevens, the founding pastor of the Bethel Baptist Church, that's still located on Fair Oaks in the Altadena area. He asked me a question when he came in for the first time and saw the renovated building. He said, "Son, do you know why they allowed this church to be built down here in 1925? And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "It was to keep Black people south of Colorado." Because this, again, in the mid-20s, was the heart of the African-American neighborhood. Came to find out recently at the dedication of several historic monuments in what used to be the old, not Caltech, the old Parsons project. They uncovered some monuments that are intended to remind people of not only the African-American presence down here, but also the Japanese business owners, the Latino people that populated this part of the city. But then, as many of us know, the 710 freeway plowed through a major part of that neighborhood and displaced a lot of people. A lot of eminent domain was enforced, and a lot of the business owners, again, the Japanese business owners, the Latino business owners, the Black business owners were displaced. And so Friendship started out as a neighborhood church. Then we became a downtown church. And I'll try to speak to that later. Back to Deacon Williams' writings. Sensing a shift in culture, and with the aid of the Second Baptist Church of LA, California, from a Sunday school group, a charter was made bringing the genesis of Friendship Baptist Church, having Reverend J.M. Fowler as its first pastor. If my memory serves me correctly, I'm the 16th pastor. And by the way, we celebrate our 39th year this year, and hopefully we'll be able to do a big shindig. I think the word shindig may reveal how old I actually am, for our 40th year next year. So stay tuned for that. That should be awesome. We have the original ledger books that attest to nickels, dimes, and dollars that went toward the building of Friendship, which was completed in 1925. There is a historical testimony that private white churches also contributed to the building fund to help Friendship Baptist Church come to fruition. At one time, the Black-brown communities went from the south, which was down on Bellefontaine, to the mountains, which was considered rural. Fremont Street was the prized street to live on. Cypress Street was also seen as having obtained a high living status. And he says this fact will have meaning later. Policies like taxes can determine the direction and outcomes of a community. The Black community in Pasadena was the victim of both. The Valley Hunt Club was a precursor of the Pasadena Board of Realtors, and they, with the help and blessing of the FHA, enacted policies that instituted redlining. It's interesting that there are people that don't really know what redlining is or was. We had a gathering here, another historical group, and when that term was used, there were people that didn't know. And I'm not an expert, but it basically was banks and institutions, insurance companies use red pen to mark out areas that either were not able to get funding by way of loans or insurance, or if they did, they were going to pay much higher than the going rate. And I think this area and other areas in the city of Pasadena where people of color and folks that didn't quite reach the status symbols that were being sought after were the victims of redlining. So they couldn't get the loans to upgrade their properties. They couldn't get the insurance that was necessary to do the things that needed to happen. So those areas fell into disrepair. It wasn't so much that people didn't care about their neighborhoods and their communities, as sometimes stories get told, but it was the fact that they could not find an affordable source of lending. I actually remember, and I don't want to tell tales out of school, as is said, but it seems like I have this memory of my father using a straw buyer, or at least mentioning using a white person to purchase our home. We were one of the first Black families to live on our street in Pasadena, Casa Grande, right in front of Marshall. We lived right in the middle of the second block, 1651, and we were literally the first Black family there. And there was, some dust ups. We were some of the first Black students to go to Webster Elementary School, where I went from kindergarten through the 5th grade. And I'll share again some of my stories as we go along. But redlining, no loans were made. Pasadena's Black and brown areas. Therefore, Blacks could only buy in Black areas at inflated prices, and hardly no loans were given for home improvement, which meant housing growth equity was stifled. Property taxes were lower, so community expansion was limited. Despite the obstacles, Blacks had thriving businesses where kids coming up could learn a trade. The state of California and the city of Pasadena allowed the 710 freeway to be built through the heart of the Pasadena Black community, killing some 200 to 300 small businesses and hundreds of small residential houses in those neighborhoods. If you're able to look at some of the pictures from our history, you can see in the background many small houses and businesses. That's why this church was actually built here. I've heard people suggest, I mean, not recently, but people suggested that this perhaps was a church that was occupied by non-Blacks, by whites, and that somehow Friendship came along later. But that is by no means true, because again, they sought to have a permanent place of worship, and this amazing house still stands. Cypress Street, which was a rich mixture of apartment houses, became a dead-end street. Since housing was now limited, the longer stately homes became tenant homes. Friendship Baptist became the beacon of light that pushed back on the policies of disenfranchisement. Deacon Williams likes to use big words, so if I stumble over them, please forgive me. Martin Luther King came to Friendship twice to help protest the discrimination against minorities in the eateries, jobs, housing, and even the city's swimming pool. Many people know, and some may not know, that there was specific days that Black people could use the pool at Brookside. And that usually was, if I remember correctly, it might have been Friday, because they were going to clean the pool on Saturday. So Black people were allowed to use the pool prior to them cleaning it, because of course they wanted it clean so any residue of people might be washed out. That's part of our history, as wonderful as this city is. It was here at Friendship that strategy meetings were held for rallies and marches. Marcus says, pastor's father held a sign saying, yeah, my father was one of those people in his time and in his era that protested in various places. I even want to say around maybe even City Hall here, with signs that said, I am a man. And that clear fact still had to be stated by people who would be calling boys and anything other than men. So I am only one generation removed from some of the frontline people that really had to deal with the hardships of trying to establish a foothold. As a side note, this is again from Deacon Williams. Jews were not welcome in Pasadena. The famous Marx Brothers estate was in Altadena because they were not allowed to own property in Pasadena. So the story goes, this is why Beverly Hills came into existence. Another side note, Nat King Cole, the singer, bought some property on Orange Grove on the parade route. When this fact was learned, he was forced to sell it. Friendship recently weathered a major threat to its existence. It needed to be a major retrofit. And by recently, Deacon Williams is talking about the early 2000s. The church had actually been condemned. The damage was that bad. The truss that holds up our balcony had cracked. The bell tower was only made up to the standards of the mid-20s. So basically it was hollow, and the Northridge quake put a major crack in it, and they were concerned that the bell tower could literally fall off and land on the street. So there was yellow tape around the building. I think at one point, again, the church had been condemned, but by God's grace, we were able to renovate at around $1.5 million to renovate the church, to build up the walls, to narrow some of the staircases, so that we would literally be up to speed on our building. Today, we continue to feed the hungry, to house the poor, spread the good news, and that is the conclusion of Deacon Williams' findings. So I want to thank him for what he did. Now, as for me, and again, please put a red flag up if I start to talk too much or just start to drone on, because even when I was a kid, talking too much was always a problem. Teachers would write on my report cards, works well with children, pleasure to have in class, talks too much. And so again, if I run past time, somebody just wave. I can only see a few people. So Mr. Myers or Miss Sally, if you would just wave at me, give me the high sign or whatever, I will do what I can to shorten my presentation. But as was said, I am the 16th pastor of Friendship. This year will be our 39th year. And I really wanted to, as much as possible, maybe start where we are and work backwards. We right now are, and I thank you for referring to us as Friendship Pasadena Church. We are still the same building. We still, from a denominational standpoint and maybe even a theological standpoint, we are historically Baptist. But as was said, our neighborhood has changed dramatically. And I've learned from studies and books and various people that sometimes your denominational titles really don't mean as much these days as they did back in my day. And as a matter of fact, they can actually be a hindrance to different people. Because sometimes people ask you, well, what kind of church are you? And what that means to me is that when you say your denominational title, they tend to already have some preconceived notions. When you say Baptist, oh my God, you're going to be there all day long. Pastor's going to be sweating through his clothes, and y'all hate women and you hate gay people and really don't have any clue as to what it is in this house. So with that, and in this neighborhood, our traditions have been, again, and this is deeply rooted in the African-American experience in the nation, is that the tradition in many churches, and ours was one of them, that when you say you bring God your best, that included what you wear. And people always, your suit and your tie. And that was, bringing God your best. You got up early, you washed your car and made sure that, your shoes were polished, that your kids' shoes were tied well, and, and all that kind of stuff. And that had its place and still does. I'm not seeking to diminish the importance of that. But we now live in a neighborhood where people walk by this church in flip-flops, short pants, walking their poodles and drinking their lattes. And Sometimes the music will draw them into the vestibule. Sometimes our greeters will ask people to come in, and we are greeted quite often with, "Oh no, first of all, I'm not dressed right." And that can become a hindrance. So while we have over the years, we've dressed down. Again, we're not at the flip flop and short pants stage. I don't know if that will ever be a reality of Friendship. And that just might be me, because I'm still kind of old school in that way. But we are literally seeking to reach a community that does not know the cultural significance of this place. They may or may not know the heritage and the stories. They probably didn't cut their teeth on the hymns that mean so much to this generation. But from a pastoral and a Christian standpoint, they're in desperate need of Jesus. And so there's a verse in the Bible, like Paul says, "I become all things to all people, so that by all means we might win some." So Friendship Pasadena is the contemporary expression of the historic Friendship Baptist Church. We still seek to honor the struggles of the people that, again, paid their nickels and dimes, and the people that literally had to go through the harsh realities of overt racism to build this incredible place. And it still stands not only as a monument to the struggle, but as a testimony to the resilience of God's grace in our lives. We're seeking to reach as many people as possible. And that means that our congregation is beginning to and will continue to change from a, what's the word that I'm looking for? Different people, different nationalities and ethnicities are beginning to shape this historic Black Baptist church. There was a couple who have moved on, who were deacons and deaconess, a Caucasian couple, Mark and Susie Horn. They were nurses at Huntington, both retired now and living great lives. But one day, and they shared this with our leadership. One day they had just left out of the sanctuary, and they were walking through the parking lot, and one of the neighbors across the street on Dayton saw them and spoke to them and said, "Hey, do you guys go to that church?" And they said, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh, we thought it was a Black church." Now that by itself just lets you, realize how people think. What specifically does a Black church, what does that mean? What does it look like? The fact of the matter is the fact that you have to say a Black church. I think sometimes it harkens back to the fact that in many places, and again, at some time in Pasadena's history, that Black people were not welcome into some of the white churches, so they had to create their own churches, and that became the white church, the Black church thing. We're doing all that we can, not only to acknowledge that, but to undo that, to love on people as much as we possibly can, to retain our historic value, but also to help people realize that, we don't hold anything against anybody. If you walk into this house, you'll be loved on by people that genuinely love you and genuinely want you to have a relationship with the Lord, and also with us in a fellowship. So if you're not doing anything some Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, feel free to make your way down to Friendship Pasadena Church, 80 West Dayton. Be glad to have you. But if I can, what I want to do, hopefully I didn't lose you, is flip my screen, and hopefully this is going to work. Well, I'm gonna start here and see again if I don't make a mess of things and how this works. I think it's better if I just change the camera. Switch camera to. Can you see this clear enough?
Very good. Very nice.
This is the sanctuary, and this is Luan Bedro. This is our secretary trying to sneak in and hand me some information. She hates when I do this, but this is what I do. Thank you. Who is this?
No.
Okay. I love giving grief to people. It makes my day. But this is the sanctuary of Friendship Pasadena Church. There's a few things that we have altered, but when we did the renovations, a man by the name of Ron Lewis, who was very prominent in the city in a lot of areas, he said that when you do something to a historic building, it should look like it was born there, like it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. And the architecture of this building is just incredible. You'll notice that all of the seats are curved, that the floor is slanted. That's not the right word, but from the back to the front, so you're not looking in the back of anybody's head. The altar area / stage area is an elevated space, and our baptism pool, we can baptize right in the house here. If you notice the lighted arches, we just put lights up in those arches. Behind those used to be the pipes for the pipe organ. We had a pipe organ that sat right behind that arch right there. Right back here in this area was the pipe organ. When we started the renovation of the building, they told us it was going to be about $10,000 to renovate it. And we just didn't think that that was a wise investment because we weren't going back to pipe music. So what we did was we disconnected it and we put it over there. That is the original pipe organ that was installed in the church. Some of this furniture was added by Reverend Marvin T. Robinson. That used to be the pastor's seat that was up on the pulpit. This used to be the speaker's podium. And that gentleman right there is Reverend William Dennis Carter. Reverend Robinson, the former pastor, named his son, who was my best friend and my best man after Dr. Carter. He was the pastor when the church was first built here in 1925. And this area that we're looking at right now is called Carter's Chapel. It's used as an overflow room. We did some updates and put some screens up here, so in the overflow that you don't have to look at these concrete pillars. And it really is a beautiful, beautiful place. It is an amazing testimony of people that went through so much. And I think that they would be pleased with what we're seeking to do in honoring them. Let's take a little walk down the hallway, if you don't mind. Hopefully, again, the Wi-Fi will, not going to take you upstairs, but upstairs there are classrooms. Downstairs, there is what we call the social hall, and our nursery is down in that area. This back way to the baptismal pool out here. That's the one's office. My little closet is down the way. And this is what we call the history hall. Many of these pictures were downstairs. That is in memory of some folks. Here's some of the pictures of people from, what does that say? Oh, that's in memory of one of our members. Oh, now I can see it. If somebody just touched a button, thank you, because now this is beautiful. That was the gospel choir in the mid-60s. And as you can see, the large podium to the right, to my right, it might be your left. That's Pastor Marvin T. Robinson. And that's how the pulpit area looked back in the day. This gentleman right here in the middle, that handsome rascal, that's my father, who was a trustee. And I remember all of these. That is Mr. Fred Valentine of the Valentine Mortuary. That's my godfather. And some of these were the movers and shakers of the city. This lady right here, Rena Lee Parks. As a child, she was the person that turned to friendship. That is friendship, what we look like in about, I think, 1964. And again, hopefully the focus, this handsome little kid right there, that's me. In 1964, I must have been around 5. That's Reverend Robinson's son. That's Reverend Robinson right there. My father is right this somewhere around. Anyway, these are some of the wonderful people that made this church what it is. And rather than take you all the way down the hall, well, I will, just to show you, again, a lot of the pictures and our history. This is a document from our founding. That the lady who I told you was breaking earth, that's her doing it in 1925. That's Mrs. Rena Lee Parks. Before the church was built, I believe that's Dr. Carter standing next to her. And yes, she passed away a few years back. But again, a lot of history. This is another picture that I love. This is what it looked. This was the 1920s vibe of right outside on the corner of Dayton and DeLacy. The cornerstone is right behind these people here. But I love just the look. I mean, the whole 20s, you know, the Apple hats and the Model A's or Model T's or whatever those were. That's what friendship was all about. This is, lighting may not be the best, and for some odd reason, when they did the renovations, they did everything our color. That is the from which Martin Luther King preached when he was here. It really glistens up to the classrooms. Well, there are 3 of these classrooms at Friendship. This is the smallest one. And each one of those side rooms were classrooms. When I was a little kid, we used to meet for Sunday school here. And then all of the kids would break out into smaller classes and go to your classrooms. And then after that, we would come out and everybody would say what they learned. And this is where I kind of grew up. But one of the things that I love too, I don't know if this will open, but this is a pass-through. And rather than interrupt the classes, let's see if I can get it on this side, the teachers would get our offerings. Come on, thing. And this would put your offerings here, out here, and that way they wouldn't interrupt the classes. There are 2 more classrooms just like that upstairs, each one progressively larger. Now, here is my claim to fame. Again, Martin Luther King preached here. Hopefully the reflection is not that bad. The gentleman that is shaking his hand again, that is my father, Mr. Fletcher Smith. That gentleman right there is Reverend Marvin T. Robinson in the glasses. Again, the gentleman above my father's right shoulder, that would be my godfather, Mr. Fred Valentine. And again, these were the businessmen of this city. His wife, Credicott Scott King, she would come from time to time and sing concerts. The woman to the far right over here, that's my mother, Mrs. Gloria Smith. That's the former pastor's wife, Wilma Jean Robinson. Not sure who the gentleman in the right on the white is. But now, drum roll please, this young man right there, that's me back in the day. Again, my friend Dennis, named after Dr. Carter, Reverend Robinson, and I remember Reverend Mims. And then you have some of the history of when the church was going through the renovation process. We had to close down for a while. The old Worldwide Church of God property. Let me flip the camera back now and go back to my seat. The Worldwide Church of God property that went from Green Street to Del Mar and from DeLacy all the way over to Orange Grove. When they went major changes, they allowed us to use their gymnasium. They had a high school gymnasium called, an actual high school called Imperial School. And they allowed us to utilize their gymnasium for free for 2 years. We did not pay a dime in rent. They offered us padded seats, padded floors. They literally had to turn on the air conditioning for the entire school, which was vacant, so that we would have heat and air in the various seasons. So Friendship has been through a lot, and we are still growing. We're in the process of revamping and revisiting our governance structure, looking to move to an elder-based model, which I think will allow us to be more effective in what we do. We're still trying to be meaningful to the senior saints who have, made us who we are, but also realizing that we need to engage a community at a different level. There are people who say, and I think I understand why they say it, that you shouldn't rewrite history. And I agree with that in this sense, that history is what it is. And to change facts, I think is the wrong approach. But I think of it like this too. And I said this at the unveiling of these monuments in the old Parsons project. If you have ever read a book in your life that you enjoyed, or you just simply read it and you read the story, started in one place, ended in another place, and you believe that because you read that book or heard that story, that was it. But if years later, if you were to realize that maybe some of the pages had been torn out, or some of the story simply hadn't been told, I think that you would want to go back and find out what was missing. Forgive me for having this behind my ear. In American history, and specifically in Pasadena history, there are some untold stories. There are some facts that were either overlooked or intentionally omitted. And what we are seeking to do is not to deny our past, nor to be so tied to it that we can't move forward, but to make sure that the whole story gets told. There is a sitting, don't want to put this person in too much of a spotlight, but I don't think that they would mind. There's a sitting city councilman in Pasadena who has stated, at least to me and to others, that there are still records in Pasadena of open meetings, open forums, where they were discussing how to either move or remove the Black people in the city of Pasadena. Those discussions were had as to where Black people could live, as to what they could do, and what the ultimate intention was of either moving or removing them. And I think the 710 freeway was a part of that. Best of intentions, but for some odd reason, and on another note, we're dealing with some of that reality now while we're seeking to purchase some affordable housing units. We're running into some issues with another city that on its own records are just now trying to deal with being a sundown city. Many of you probably know what that means, is that being a sundown city, that meant that people of color, specifically Black people, could not, should not be in that city, at least on the streets, when the sun goes down. And one of those cities is directly adjacent to Pasadena. And as of February, just February of this year, they're seeking to remove some of the residual racism from their own books. Those laws may or may not be enforceable now, but again, it's just a testimony to how things have changed and how they are changing. So, if there's any questions, I'd love to answer them. Again, Friendship Pasadena Church is the contemporary expression of the Friendship Baptist Church. We're called the mother church by many churches because some churches started from Friendship. I was told that even the Metropolitan Baptist Church in Altadena started as a church split from Friendship in the early 1900s. And now they're thriving, and we work together well. But there's so many layers and so many things to what's happening in the city. And I'm just glad to be part of it. I'm glad to share my story with you. And if there are any questions, I'd
Pastor
love
Smith,
to.
Yeah, I'd like to just pick up on your mention of a sundown town there. One of our previous speakers in the 1619 project was Carol McGrath, who had a history. She told us about her experience as a resident of Glendale, where she discovered that Glendale still had the sundown regulations on its books while she's living there. And she said, this is intolerable. You know, I'm going to do something about this. And this goes back 10 or 12 years now, but she started a campaign, and ultimately within the last couple of years, she got those regulations removed from the books of Glendale and got a formal apology from the city for having been a sundown town. So I think that's a historical point of some interest here. And we have a recording of that presentation up on our blog where you could go take a look at it, see. But that was a very interesting history lesson that she gave us about her personal experience of getting the regulations removed from the books in Glendale.
Yes, and this other city, we were told through we have a separate CDC that is seeking to purchase property for low income and or affordable housing. And we were told that the city where we're seeking to operate as of February of this year, either just is now starting or is continuing the process of doing that very thing. So it's still interesting that in 2022, some of the things that, you know, the dark secrets and the dark corners are still, we're just now starting to shed some light in those areas. So that is a good thing.
I have one comment and then a question. My comment is I was brought up in a Baptist church at a I was very young when I was put into Sunday school there and was there through my teens. And so your comments on people not understanding what it means necessarily from church to church within the Baptist community, because I remember distinctly, I mean, I didn't know any difference. I'd meet other young people and they'd say, what are you? And I'd say, I'm a Baptist at the time. And they'd say, oh, that means you can't dance. And I'd look at them like they were crazy, because I said, I learned to square dance in the church dining room.
Oh my God. What a pagan thing to do.
Yes, of course. The other thing is, my geography seems to be a little confused. Am I hearing you? You keep talking about the 710 freeway, which never reached Pasadena.
Oh,
It is referred to as the 710 spur. It is the end of the
Yeah, but it ends
210.
it doesn't end in Pasadena.
It ends on Del Mar Street. If you go, say, westbound on the 134 or the 210,
You mean the part that never was
210
built?
goes north. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
the part that was never built, that makes more sense.
Yes.
Because it ends down by LA State College.
Right. But there is a spur that was
Right, that never got
intended
completed.
to. Right. And so there were properties in South Pasadena called the Caltrans corridor.
Yes, I'm very familiar with that.
Yes.
I also remember your church when it was condemned after the Northridge earthquake, and it
Yes,
was that way.
Yes, ma'am. I was here.
So those properties, can you hear me?
Yes. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Sorry. Those properties are all still owned by Caltrans. They're just now focusing on selling those properties and somehow getting rid of them, that freeway extension will never be built. But
Right.
the 210 freeway, placement of the 210 freeway was placed where it was, right through a lot of the Black community, as it really was part of the separation that they tried to do. Even the freeway down by Dodger Stadium was part of that, going through neighborhoods that they felt were not, that they wanted to erase. So the 210 freeway is part of going through what was a historically Black neighborhood. I wanted to ask,
Yes, ma'am.
when was the church built? I missed that fact. When?
This current building was completed in 1925. Friendship was established in 1893. I believe that they started meeting in a hall on what was called Kansas Street, which is now Green Street. And then after that, they purchased a building on, what is the name of the street? Again, the freeway kind of plowed through there. It was on a street that's escaping me now. But then they decided to relocate, and they found this piece of property. What is the name of the street? Because it's important. But this building was completed in 1925. This is, I think, the second building that Friendship has been in, and it's been here all this time.
Is that Dayton Street?
Dayton and DeLacy, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Dayton and DeLacy. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to add, I grew up in a city back east. And I remember when the city got their urban renewal money, and they ended up doing the same thing there. They basically wiped out the minority neighborhoods, which they considered blighted, and built the new library and some other buildings. But at the time, I remember driving through those areas and thinking how interesting they were. They had such old buildings and interesting architecture, but because they were mostly occupied by poor people, primarily Puerto Ricans and some African Americans, the city considered it disposable. So
Right.
the entire blocks got wiped out.
And again, if you think about the behind the scenes, the redlining, the inability of some of those businesses and homeowners to get an affordable loan to upgrade it, it fell into disrepair just because they couldn't get money. For many people, it's not that. And I don't think anybody wants to live in a blighted area. Like, hey, let's move to the blighted part of town. But when there are systems in place to systematically over time cause the property values to drop, and the city services are, aren't up to par, then you can look at, wow, like the temptation from many people is, look at these people. Don't they care? Don't they want more? Maybe it would be better for us to take it from them, and then that becomes a sales pitch. We want to improve. We want this part of our city to be vibrant. But then you displace those people, create a market that is far beyond their ability to come back. That's what Pasadena right now is dealing with. We have, and again, as a lifelong resident of the city, I've heard conversations and terminology changed. It went from low income housing. We're going to build low income. And just like the terminology of you're a Baptist can have certain connotations in people's minds, when you say low income, people tend to think of what they would call like low income people, that this is going to turn into a slum, it's going to turn into a ghetto, so we don't want to build low income. So let's change the term now to affordable. And that term became a nebulous term, because if you can afford a $3 million home, but you can get it for $1 million, for you, that's affordable. And so the housing boom in Pasadena created this vacuum of people who even work in the city. They were not able to live here. So now the term here and in certain places is workforce housing, meaning that your people, like your firemen and women, your police officers, can't afford to live here, right across the street from us, right here on the Lacey. I don't know what the square footage is, but I know it's less than 2,000 square feet, 1,500, 1,200, whatever, for apartments and units, going for $4,500 a month. And I think the vacancy rate is relatively low. And so what was supposed to happen in these units was the city had worked out a air quote deal with the developers. You are supposed to, within your development, within the actual development, you are supposed to designate a certain number of units as affordable or pay a fee. It was called the in lieu of fee, that if you didn't want to do that, then you pay the city X number of dollars, and then the city was supposed to take this in lieu money and build units. So again, me being me, thinking like I think, if I'm going to be a developer and you're going to impose a cost on me to build a unit business, I'm going to pass that cost on to the person that's buying the unit. And so the property value specifically in Pasadena skyrocketed. There were studies of how housing prices had gone up across the country. The closer you got to the West Coast, the more the increase. And then I think it was in LA County and even in Pasadena, there was a huge spike in the national average and what Pasadena was charging. So they're just now, and apparently the building right across the street, I just heard a few months ago from our city councilman, Steve Madison, that the city planned on somehow dealing with this property, the unit from Dayton Street down to Valley, and make it workforce housing. Now, how they're going to do that with people that already live there, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that they're not going to make people move. But again, for me, and knowing what I know about this area and about the city and just about how people do things, for me, it's all smoke and mirrors. We're concerned about, we want to, but you have created a system that's hard to back away from. when you have the developers that know that they can charge top dollar, they're not going to intentionally take less. They're going to do all that they can do, which prices many people out of the market. So again, I'm gonna get that off my soapbox for a minute, but in the middle of all of that sits the oldest historic Black Baptist church in the city. The only reason why we're still here, one is, of course, the grace of God, but the fact that we're designated as a national, we're not a national landmark. We're on the National Registry of Historic Places.
Historic places.
Yes. And that basically limits the use. So nobody could buy this place and make it a hotel or a restaurant. But as they say, it is what it is. But we're going to continue to kind of do all that we can to make sure that justice is done by the people of this city, specifically those that don't have a voice or don't feel like they do have one. That's what Reverend King did, was he sought to give a voice to the voiceless. And because he put his hand on my shoulder, I feel like there's a little bit of that residue that's on me. So that's who I am, and that's who we are.
Pastor Smith, I heard an interesting story on KPCC the other morning. They were talking about, and you brought up references here to things like affordable housing and the history of how things developed in redlining and things like that. And I heard about a teacher in the Silver Lake area, whose name I believe was Sofer. I didn't really catch her name, but she is teaching classes where she is teaching the suppressed history. I think this is at the high school level. And I found that very interesting that something like that was going on here, because I know in most places, you know, this kind of history is suppressed and just not taught. And that's why people don't really know about it. I mean, it's there in plain sight if you look for it, but it isn't what is taught in the schools. But I heard about this teacher and I said, gee, this is very interesting. I'd like to get in touch with her somehow. And so I don't know if you are familiar with that or heard of it, but if you have a lead to that, I'd appreciate that. I'm going to try to reach her and see if we can get her to come talk to us about what she's doing and how it's working. So I think that would be.
And if you could repeat her name, you froze a little bit.
Okay, I think her name was something like Sofer, and I didn't catch it, and I spelled it in my own head as Sopher, but that was just me and my hearing and trying to come up with something. But she's in Silver Lake. I did get that, and my impression was that she's teaching this at the high school level in Silver Lake, and I'm trying to track her down and find out how to get in touch with her. So if you have any kind of lead, if you have any lead on anything like that or hear about that, I'd appreciate a lead from you.
I will do all I can to look for that. And by the way, the name of the street that Friendship, the first church, was built on was called Vernon Street. Vernon is now gone through the freeway. So we went from Kansas Street, which is now Green Street, to Vernon, the first church, and then now Dayton and Lacey. And we're going to be here for a while.
Okay, well, this is very interesting. I really appreciate the tour, and I think the tour worked pretty well. I felt like I could see it pretty well, and if I can see it, anybody can. So, I thought it worked pretty well. So I think that was a good idea that you had. And I did learn something. I was the one that pushed the button. I learned how to spotlight you there. So you taught me a lesson here of how to use Zoom. So I appreciate that.
I saw the spotlight. Now all I have to do is learn how to do that on my end.
All right, well, let's talk and I'll show you the trick because I learned it from working with you here. So that's, you learn as you go, right?
Wonderful. Perfect.
Yeah. So, all right, any other questions? Anybody's got any comment or reflection on anything that we talked about that you'd like to bring up and open up for discussion? So the floor is open. If anybody wants to say it, just unmute yourself if you're muted.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. Since I'm not from the West Coast, I'm not from California, but I've been here quite a few years. But since I've been living in Altadena, I've heard so much about your church. I've always heard about it, but I never saw it. So this was very nice for me, and I'm going to make it make a point of attending your church one Sunday.
You know where to find us.
Yes.
We'll have to arrange, we do Friday morning walks through the neighborhoods.
Oh,
and,
yes.
We should do one
Okay.
there. We should
Yes,
do
that's a
one
good
there.
idea, Wayne.
Just let us know and we'll be here with bells on.
Oh, great.
We always try to end up at a place where we can get coffee.
Listen, let's talk about that, and maybe we can, have a little something down in our social hall. We can send some folks up to Starbucks and grab a few little of the crafts, and just make it a day
Oh,
All right,
great.
good.
or a morning at least.
That's wonderful.
Definitely.
Okay,
know-
Valerie, you're in charge.
No, Wayne, your education.
This is the Friday morning walks. This is not education.
Okay. Okay, I'll do that.
Val is getting a lesson in how volunteering works in the village.
Oh, yeah, they taught me a lot.
Nudge, nudge,
Don't
nudge,
open your
nudge.
mouth. You'd be amazed how many committees you end up on.
That's right. So, all right, any other questions, anybody?
No, I just wanted to add, I'm not a Christian at this point in my life, but I had been in the past. And there's been several times when I attended churches that were either Black or another ethnicity. And what I experienced, I really liked. And I think that a lot of the white churches miss something by not being able to stand up and wave your arms and yell amen and whatever. I just think there's so much joy in that. I just think if you went to church and you did that, you would come out feeling really raised up.
Mhm.
I think it's cool.
Just to add on to that, I remember in college, I was a budding journalist, and I wanted to do an article on a local Black church in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And it was a church kind of like yours. It had been around a long time. Hardly anybody knew about it, but it had a lively Black congregation that met there every Sunday. And so they invited me to come. And I have to tell you, I was shocked, liturgically shocked, because I was raised a Catholic and, in the Catholic Church. And this started before everything changed in the 60s. And suddenly I was in this lively church where people were speaking out and I think you call it, there's a name for it when you support what the pastor's saying. You
Call and response.
call and response. And I'd never seen that done in a church. And then at one point, people were coming up and witnessing and stuff like that. And it was just a totally different experience that I was used to for a Sunday service. I was used to being really quiet
And
doing
hopefully
what
I'm
I
not
was
stepping on your
told.
line here. That is one of the major reasons why we now are Friendship Pasadena. There were people who were offended, maybe, that, oh, are you ashamed to be Baptist? I'm not ashamed of anything. But if there's a hindrance, if something that I hold dear, short of something that's essential. I mean, there are some things within our faith that are non-negotiable and essential. Those will never change. It's the foundation upon which our faith is built. But everything else is up for grabs. I was saying this. I use this as an example. I just recently started eating fish. And so I'm definitely not going to go fishing because people say it's called fishing, not catching. And I don't have a lot of time to catch. I want to get at it. But in 1925, this area, again, being a predominantly Black area, catching, if you will, to use the example of fish, catching Black Baptists was not a problem because this lake was teeming with people who who bought on that bait. You sing a certain kind of song, you present a certain kind of message, you create a certain kind of environment, and the fish in the lake were jumping in the boat, and so it wasn't a problem. But then everything changes, the demographic changes, and now we are surrounded by anything but Black Baptists. However, we're called to fish anyway. That's like Jesus said, I'll make you fishers of men. So sometimes in churches, I think sometimes even in organizations and in businesses, and maybe even in our personal lives, we get too attached to how we do a thing as opposed to why we do it. Because we came in contact with whatever, with our business, with a certain methodology that got us there. And so we married to the method. But if people are no longer responding to your method, you have to get back to, well, why am I doing this in the first place? If your methods aren't working, if the people that are there are more people surrounding this church today than there ever was in the mid-20s. And for us to lament the fact that our pews are not as full as they once were, that's probably an us problem more than it is a them problem, because they may not bite on the songs that I bit on when I was a kid. They may not bite on the cultural paradigms that were so meaningful and should remain meaningful. But if my goal is to catch fish, just because my father taught me that I catch a fish with a silk string, an iron hook, and a piece of cheese, the fish in this lake may not bite on that anymore. So we have to, if we want to survive, if we want to don't just die and close our doors and mourn the passing of yet another church that failed to see the opportunities, then we have to readjust our sails. We have to rebait our hooks and realize we're called to fish. So we need to become who we need to become, not losing our identity and our cultural relevance. But Friendship Pasadena is going to do all that we can to honor the legacy of the people that paid their nickels and dimes and build on that. So that's what we're all about.
Do you put your services out on Facebook and Zoom?
Yes, not Zoom, Facebook and YouTube. If you go and look for Friendship Pasadena Church on Facebook or on YouTube, you should find us. And just take a test drive there, Sally, because if you come back in here, we're gonna get you.
All right, great. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll close up a little bit early here and have a little extra time. We can go do some other things. So last go round, anybody got a final thought they'd like to put out?
No, I just want to thank you, Lucia, for coming and
Thank you.
educating us.
Yes, thank you.
I'm no match for Deacon Williams, but I hope that I was able to fill the spot decently.
Very good.
Well, wish him all the best. Tell him stay off those ladders. I hope he's learned his lesson now.
Yes,
And,
he definitely has. I think he's selling his ladder today.
yeah, that's good. All right. Well, we'll look
thank you,
forward.
everybody.
We'll look forward to meeting him later.
Yes, and I look forward to one of those walks too.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.